Hi, it's Jennifer from Shabby Fabrics. Welcome to the Easy Piece Table Runner for July. We had so much fun designing this. This is the disappearing hourglass block, and we had a lot of fun doing the applique on both ends. We even added a little special feature on the barn with a dimensional 9-patch quilt. So fun. We'll get into that more a little bit later on. If you want to do this project, and I really encourage it, it's been a lot of fun, go ahead and download the instructions. There's 7 pages here. This is a very comprehensive pattern for the Easy Piece Table Runner series for July. Now this is a 12-month series, so if you're just now seeing this, we have previous months as well that you might want to go download. Go to the Shabby Fabrics homepage at the very bottom, click on free downloads, and then you'll be looking for the Easy Piece Table Runner series. And again, this is for July. We're always going to bring you the project for the month coming up. So we're filming this early so that you'll have plenty of time to make the project to display in the month of July. So after you get everything downloaded, of course, all of our measurements will be on that. So we won't be going into those specific measurements. I'll be mostly talking to you about technique and how to build the disappearing hourglass block, which looks complicated, but you'll be amazed at how simple and fun it is that even a beginner can do it. So because you'll be dealing with some bias, I strongly encourage you to be using the Magic Light Hold sizing. If you've ever worked with fabric before and cut on the bias, you know there's a stretch there that can make piecing more difficult. If you add some sizing to the fabric and be generous with that, I don't just do a light spray, I really coat that fabric, iron it dry, and then start working with it. It definitely helps to keep that bias stretch under control, and the blocks just seem to come out a lot better. So enough about the sizing, I'll put that aside for now. This is what the block looks like. And you wouldn't expect it, but the way we start off with the block is actually just with 2 squares, one colored and one light, and we place those right sides together. These are 8-inch squares to start off with. Of course, the measurements are in your download. Step 1 will be to put on either just a plain ruler and draw a line and sew either side of that, or Fons & Porter has this really cool ruler for that very purpose. Notice the line right here. And the whole purpose of that line is to just put that from one diagonal to the other, and with, this is a friction pen, I simply draw on either side of the line. And I love that I'm using a spinning mat today, so I can just turn that around. It's a lot more natural to draw on the right side for me. I'm very right-handed. And just draw. And go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch, or excuse me, you will sew exactly on those drawn lines, which is great. Normally when you do this without that ruler, you have, well, I'll just demonstrate that. You would have your ruler here, and you would typically draw that line and sew on a 1/4 inch on either side. What I love about the Fons & Porter ruler is all I have to do is sew on the drawn line. I don't have to meander and hope I'm getting that 1/4 inch. It's exactly where it should be. Now once you have that done, and we've already went ahead and sewed that ahead of time, so let me put that aside. We'll just grab any ruler you have, and we will go diagonal to diagonal, and we will cut that in half, just as you would suspect. And now we have our 2 halves. Now one thing we learned about this block, we made it a couple times before we put the table runner together, is it required very precise piecing to have all of the points come out exactly where you want them to be. With that said, one of the first things that we're going to do is make sure that we're doing some very accurate pressing. We don't want any of this motion again because we do have bias. Yes, we've added the sizing, but still you always have the potential for stretching. So with that in mind, I encourage you to go ahead and finger press that to the side. Give a good nice finger press and truly just press with your iron. Try to resist the temptation to do this motion because that can kind of twist and distort the fabric out of shape. All right, and of course we do the same thing with the other one, where I like to set the seam. it seems to relax the fabric, and it's more compliant, I would say, to go in the direction you want it to go. I give a good nice finger press, and then again, notice I'm just pressing, none of this twisting motion. All right, so we're trying to set ourselves up for success. Each of these steps along the way, especially if you're a beginner quilter, matters. Everything really does matter. By the way, if you are, let's say you're using fabric out of your stash, you've downloaded the pattern. Of course, we have this available as a kit, but maybe you want to use your own fabrics, which is wonderful. I always want you to go ahead and add sizing and iron your fabric before you cut that. Do not iron it really trying to get wrinkles out after you've cut it to size. That's how things get distorted and out of shape. One of the other things I mentioned is it's very important that this block is exactly square going into the step that we're going to be cutting it, kind of cutting it up to create the disappearing hourglass. For that reason, we're going to actually square up this block now using our Creative Grid ruler to 7 inches. It's that important that this block is square. Now this ruler has a beautiful diagonal right here. So the first thing I'm going to do, keeping in mind I want to square this up to 7, is I like to square up anything on all 4 sides versus squaring it up on just 2 sides, right? Because each side has a slight imperfection. So hopefully the overhead camera can see my 7 right here, and here's my 7. So I'm not going to line up my 7 all the way out here. I'm going to be inside of that so that I have the opportunity to square up all 4 sides. Now let me just move some things out of the way so I can rotate my mat. I definitely do not want to disturb anything once I begin this trim up process. So I have my diagonal line here. Here's my 7 and here's my 7. I have plenty of room to go ahead and start squaring up, and I'm going to do that right now. So let's press straight down. I keep pressing while I rotate this mat. All right, so now I'm going to rotate that one more time. I'm just going to rotate my ruler. We now know these 2 sides are clean, right? Actually, let's go ahead and do this like this, because these are the 2 sides, actually these are the 2 sides that are squared up. So we're going to draw that. There's my 7. I can draw my ruler back down to those lines now, because we squared up those sides, right? 7 and 7, and my dash line is going right along there. Again, I'll rotate that. Perfect. So this is definitely something that when we first made the block, we didn't square up. We just kind of had reduced our blocks down from the 8 to a different measurement. And whatever that half square triangle is, we just sewed it together. The block came out okay, but we wanted to come out perfect. So we found that this squaring up process definitely helped. You will do this and you'll repeat that for 4 half square triangle units. And then you will lay them out just on your table. Like this one's this way, you do another one this way, here and here. And you're just going to sew those together as you would normally expect to do something like that. It's just right sides together, opposite seams and interlocking. So you have a nice interlocking unit, and that's what it looks like from the back side. Once you're here, your block should be 13.5 inches. It's very important you do a measurement check at this point, because if it's not 13.5, the block will not come out. So go ahead and do a measurement check at that point. Now I'm going to bring out a bigger ruler. 13.5 divided by 3 is 4.5. So I'm going to use my larger ruler, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it around. This is my Creative Grids. My black dots are fractions of an inch, so 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5. Since I am going to be using a 4.5 inch cut, I will be using the black dots. If I was doing a whole cut, say 4 inches, I would be using this side. The white dots represent whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 6. So let's turn that around again. All I have to do, and we know our block is nice and squared up because we did that. We're going to lay the ruler on the 4.5, and I'm just riding along the edge of my block. Okay. And I'm going to come over and lay that ruler down exactly where I just cut. If you can't see it, because the cut was so clean, if you have to move the fabric just a bit, this cut out of the way, go ahead and do it and double check. We'll put it back before we cut the other direction. And I'm going to go ahead and make that cut. And I always like to just double check that I'm at 4.5 inches. And if there's anything extra, I'll trim it away. Just a touch. Let's trim that away. Okay. Remember I said that we have to kind of put this back together because we're going to rotate this now 90 degrees. See where the spinning mat is so important. We don't want to disturb our block. Again, we're going to start with, I think this side ends up being a little bit square. I'm going to start over on this side. Okay, let me start over here. 4.5. So just like we did before. Again, 4.5. I can see the line this time. And let's double check ourselves. Trim just a touch. Okay, now this is so cool. I'll put the block up here so you can see what's going to happen. So we have, this is what we're going for. That's what we're going to try to create. So step 1, I'll start in the center. That's going to turn 90 degrees. Every other piece around here turns 180 degrees. So I'll take that and turn it 180 degrees. How fun is stuff like this? So let's double check ourselves and make sure we have this sight picture. And it looks like we do. How fun is that? So you see how a block that appears to be infinitely complicated is actually very simple with just some strategic cuts. So let's go ahead, as you would expect, and you'll be placing right sides together, sewing 1/4 inch. And this is where I definitely recommend, again, this is all about precision. You'll go ahead and pin that, sew 1/4 inch. Same here. You'll do the same here and same here. Keeping in mind you're going to want to press so that you have interlocking seams. And then when you sew everything together, all the rows, we went ahead and pressed our seams open. Okay, so that's how you make the blocks. You'll make 2 of the blue and 1 of the red. Now let's go ahead and move on to the applique. As I mentioned before, we did something kind of fun to make a 3-dimensional quilt on the barn. I think quilts on barns are just like one of the most Americana things that there is. And whenever I see one when I'm driving in the Midwest, I literally stop and get out of my car and take a picture because it's beautiful. So that was where the inspiration came from for us to do a dimensional quilt. Now, if you're not into making tiny, tiny quilts, no worries, because in our kit, in our laser cut kit, of course, in this kit, you'll get all the fabrics you need for the piecing, but you'll also get your necessary applique pieces, pre-fused and laser cut. If you're not into making little miniature quilts, don't worry. We've included the pieces so that you can make, this is just a fusible applique version where it was a piece of white fabric and we have 5 little squares. So you can just fuse that down. But if you like the idea of having a cute little dimensional quilt on your barn, let me show you how to make that. So you will have an option in your kit, and that fabric will come from the leftover fabric from making your block. So there'll be plenty of fabric left over. So I'll get that out and show you. This is what the little thing looks like before we put the backing on it. So the instructions will just be having you cut 1-inch strips. You'll do 3 of the blue and 3 of the white, and you'll piece your strips together, white in the middle, 2 blue on the outside, and then the opposite will be 1 blue in the middle, 2 on the white side, on the outside, and you'll piece them together like this, pressing to the dark each time. Once you have that, let's put that aside. We'll just cut some 1-inch little units off of that. How cute was this? This was one of those ideas where we were making this and we said, what about making a 3-dimensional little quilt for the barn? And we just had to do it. I think we had a lot of fun doing that. So you'll just cut. So you can see, looking at this, you only really need 1 of these units for each of your little tiny quilts. But you would need 2 of each of these for your quilt, because that's on the top and the bottom. So let me just square that up real quick. Actually, I'll cut from this side. Let's make 2 real fast. Okay. So as you would do any 9 patch, you'll just lay that out, make sure that's what you want, and that is our site picture. It's so tiny. So you'll go right sides together, and the seams nest like any other quilt. And of course the pins, you're just getting that ever so slightly in there. It's kind of sticking out. It's super cute. So cute. Take it to your sewing machine, sew 1/4 inch. Just don't be shy. It's still a regular 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you'll do the same. And then I'll show you the back of ours. We just kind of pressed it like that. So now you have this unit, and you have your little square that is your backing of your little tiny quilt. And what we decided to do, we were trying to find a way to turn it through. It's too little. There's too much bulk to turn it through. So we went ahead and sewed 1/4 inch all the way around. In fact, let me go do that. I want to show you how we did this because it might not be what you'd be expecting. Let me just come over. By the way, I'm piecing with the 50 weight confetti. This is our neutral set. I use this for all of my piecing. Even if I'm piecing something that's all blue, I just use neutral thread. You really don't need more than that. Now when you start doing, if you want coordinating thread for applique, of course we have that thread set. But for piecing, of course, we're not going to be seeing that thread. So let's sew 1/4 inch all the way around. This is so cute. Okay, we wanted to reduce the bulk in the corner, so we did just kind of trim that on a 45. And how we did that is at the very top where this is kind of sewn, we hand tack that to the back. Up top, near the top, we just kind of pulled it apart and put a little slit in there. You just have to be careful you don't cut all the way through to the front. So let's try to separate it. There we go. And once you kind of get your slit going and you can get your scissors in there, there we go. Now you can go ahead and turn it through. It's so tiny. This is where you will want to use, oh my goodness, the clover point turner. This is going to save you on this one because it's so tiny in there, you can't get your fingers in there. How fun is this? And then just flip that top back. Okay. How adorable is this? Okay. So you could, if you felt inclined, let me get that out a little bit more, close that at the top, with a little whip stitch. The other option too, if you don't want it to be moving around at all, is potentially stitch it all the way around all four sides down to the background, down to the top of the barn versus only tacking at the top. So that's another option for you. How cute is this? And you have your little quilt there. So again, we just whip stitched ours. We kind of put that here at the top, kind of whip stitch that through. And I recommend you doing that after you've went ahead and appliqued this to the background. It's kind of it's the very last thing. So just like before, you'll have your sky fabric, you'll have your, I would call sashing fabric here, and your ground. You'll put those together first, and then you'll put your applique down, stitch that down. I encourage you to do that to both ends before you put the blocks together, so you're only dealing with that specific part of the quilt, or the runner, excuse me, versus putting the whole thing together and then appliquing, because then you're dealing with a lot more fabric as necessary. So once these are appliqued, sew all of your blocks together with the applique on both ends, and then if you decide to add the cute dimensional quilt, at that point you can just stack that down after everything's been quilted. So I hope you're enjoying the series. I'd love to get your feedback. There's more coming your way. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, or maybe share that with a friend. Maybe they'd like to jump into the fun as well. So I'll see you for the Easy Piece Table Runner coming up for August. See you then.